Hi guys, it's Narelle Cooke from Canine Pharmaceuticals, and I need to ask you the question: are you feeding your dog a standard commercial kibble that contains grains? If the answer is yes, then I absolutely recommend that you join me for this week's Thursday's Thought, because unfortunately, grains are one of the highest risk ingredients in our pet's food for mold contamination. And if we look at actual pet food recall data from the United States, firstly, you can see that dry kibble is by far the number one type of food that gets recalled, but more concerning is the cause of the recall. So you can see here that aflatoxins account for the vast majority of pet food recalls, followed by pathogenic bacteria. The majority of those cases would be due to salmonella. So to put it in context, molds produce mycotoxins as secondary metabolites, and one particular type of mycotoxin that comes from the Aspergillus fungus is aflatoxin. So why should we care about that? I'm glad you asked. So the World Health Organization, they state that aflatoxins are among the most potent mutagenic and carcinogenic substances known. So that's a pretty powerful statement. What's concerning is that aflatoxins, they're colorless, so they can't be detected under normal light. They're odorless, so contaminated food won't have a bad or a moldy smell. And they're flavorless, so food that's even dangerously contaminated with high amounts of aflatoxin won't taste off or taste moldy. Now, what happens, we know that any food that's not good enough to make it in the human food chain goes into the animal food chain, and worldwide grains are just known to be a significant source of contamination of mold and aflatoxins. And over the years, they've been looking at various ways to minimize this, but the main grains, corn is a major culprit, followed by things like wheat and rice. Now, that's not to say that other food types can't be contaminated with mold and mycotoxins. They definitely can, legumes and potatoes, fruits, some meat products, definitely, but the grains, it's just known that they're the main issue. When they looked at grain versus grain-free dog foods, again, it highlighted that the grain-containing foods were much more heavily contaminated than those that were grain-free. And the dry food was more heavily contaminated than the wet foods or the canned food. In some of the studies, they state that, okay, yes, we found mycotoxins or aflatoxins, but it was below the level that's considered unsafe. But papers are saying, we know that mycotoxins have a cumulative effect in the body. So even, daily intake of small amounts can absolutely over time be extremely damaging to our pet's health. So this paper here was actually cautioning pet owners for that very reason. We can't just assume that because it's below the acceptable limit that it's safe, because we eat different foods day to day for the most part, but our dogs can often be fed the same kibble every day of its life, and that's not good. They looked at so-called cheaper supermarket brands versus the more premium veterinary brands, and they found that irrespective of the brand, that all foods were contaminated with fungi and mycotoxins. So that was in that particular study, they looked at 20 different samples. So the problem is you can kill the actual fungal mycelium. So that's what, the white sort of colored substance that you'll often see on moldy food. But processing doesn't kill the spores and it doesn't kill the mycotoxin. So that's where the problem arises. And in this study or review paper, they're summarizing the data of all these different studies that were assessing commercial dog foods for fungi and mycotoxin contamination. And if you look at positive sample percentage, 100%, 100%, 74, the United Kingdom, 100% of the foods tested were contaminated. So it is actually really rife. And what happens is the mycotoxins, get consumed by our dogs, they get into the bloodstream and they get transported around the body that way. The liver is particularly sensitive to mycotoxin, but it can absolutely cause a lot of more serious health issues as well. Again, this is summarizing aflatoxin specifically, And you can see positive samples, 100, 95%, 87%, it goes on. Even in the United States, 88 and 77% contamination with aflatoxins. And this is the acute poisoning data for dogs that did ingest some aflatoxin amount. And, the mortality rate is huge, 100%, 100%, 68, 100. Even in the United States, 100% of dogs that consumed it died. So this is a real issue. It's a well-known issue, and it's something that we can't ignore. So what can we do differently? The first thing is to not feed a commercial food that contains grains, or if you do, look for a brand that uses human-grade ingredients. If you're motivated, you can prepare your dog's food at home, whether that's raw or cooked, because there is a significant difference in the health impact. If you go to the supermarket and buy some rice designed for human consumption and you go home and cook it, the risk of mycotoxin contamination would be extremely low compared to the animal feed quality of rice that's going into commercial pet foods. So have a think about what you might be able to do differently with diet. In terms of supporting our dog's health, there's evidence to show that the St. Mary's thistle, which we sell in the pure milk thistle, has a beneficial and protective effect on the liver in particular with animals exposed to mycotoxin contamination. So that would be a great one. But anything that's supporting immune health generally, I think would be great. I mean, milk thistle has a particular mechanism of action that makes it like one of the best options. But things like the organic super greens, the mushroom elixir, the pure colostrum, a healthy diet, they're all going to be supporting our dogs on a daily basis. But if you're concerned about, learning this and you have questions, you can reach out to us at info@canineseuticals.com.au. If you know that, if your dog got sick and you know for sure that it was due to contaminated food, it would be really beneficial if you were willing to share your story in the comments. I think a lot of pet owners would value being able to Elsa's experience. But as always, thank you for joining me for another week, and I'll see you next week.